Smenda, good morning to Mr. Richard Pitterkin and good morning to all of our viewers at home and abroad. My next and final guest this morning is already on the Flow Video platform. Let me say good morning to former magistrate, attorney at law, friend of the show, Nigel Toussiant. Hi Nigel, good morning.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, St. Lucia.
Nice to have you on, nice to see you as always. Let's
Thank
start
you.
off with next season's big news. Ask the Advocate. Our viewers and our listeners must be interested. Let's talk about this new feature which you'll be hosting here on the platform. What sort of format would it take?
Yes, as the advocate, primarily legal issues. I'm anticipating that we might go over it a little bit in social and political sphere because you don't have one really without the other. It's going to be issues that are relevant to us in St. Lucia, issues that come up in the news, events that happen. We're going to address them. We're going to answer questions for members of the public who are concerned, who have situations coming up in their life, and they need answers too. We will address a lot of those issues, things like arrests, detention, trials, land issues, those of us who've lost, those of you who have lost lands, claiming lands or in court for lands, the procedures, the things to look out for, how to protect yourself, how to protect your families, those kinds of things. We may touch into domestic violence, what to do when there are issues with that, child support, a whole myriad of issues that touch and concern us in St. Lucia. There will be questions from perhaps sometimes we may have a guest, a panel, to provide a little more expertise. But we're going to do this once a week. It's going to be helpful to the society. It's going to be primarily a show that's going to educate, it's going to open people's minds, and hopefully take us from where we are to a more sophisticated community where we're not complaining so much about being powerless, about not knowing how to navigate the system. I think everybody needs to know how to move from point A to point B when issues present themselves. And here on Hot 7, we will attempt to assist the public with many of those issues.
Excellent. In essence, Magistrate, you're feeling a void because there's been a clarion call here in society for some sort of professional legal guidance on some of these touching issues. So you'll be feeling that void in essence.
I'm hoping to. I have seen the void. I have experienced it. I am well aware of it. My time on the bench allowed me to really get a bird's eye view of what happens in St. Lucia. I have been able to understand a little bit of why it happens. I know all too well that it can be corrected. And the primary reason that it has not been corrected is because the people who experience a lot of those issues do not know what to do. They do not trust the lawyers that help them. In many instances, the lawyers are not to be trusted, not in every instance, in many. They are not in many instances, the judges are not to be trusted. So I believe that the people need an avenue to go to, so at the very least they can build that confidence that they need in order to assist themselves.
And as the advocate will be an interactive engagement where you hope to entertain calls from listeners as well.
Absolutely, because it's only then that I will know exactly what is bothering members of the public. They call in with their questions, with their concerns. Of course, I do want to give a caveat. This is not going to be a show where you call with your specific problem and you get specific answers, because in order to give you specific advice on any legal matter, a lot of questions would have to be asked. So it would allow you to know what to do when you go to that lawyer who's going to help you, what to say to him, what to ask him, what information to have with you when you go. So then you can interact with that attorney that of your choice and know when if you're being cheated, if somebody's being dishonest with you, you will be able to tell for yourself what is and what isn't, and then perhaps you get a better result at the end.
Yeah. Once a week, hosted by former Magistrate Nigel Toussiant. Fridays on Good Morning St. Lucia. I'll keep you updated with the schedule and tell you lots more. Former Magistrate, I want to give you the assurance that the promotional posters will be ready within the next 24 to 48 hours. We have received the official photographs from you.
Thank you.
Let's deal with other matters of national interest now. The name Crystal St. Omer rings a bell?
Crystal St. Omer. Actually, yes, I was not in St. Lucia at the time the murder happened, but there has been a lot of talk of it. Of course, it's in the news recently because the young man had his day in court and he was sentenced. So yes, I am familiar with that.
All right. We won't go in too much detail with that particular case, but last Friday, a verdict was handed down. He has been sentenced to 18 years, 10 of which he has already served for a murder crime. Off the bat, how do you receive this judgment?
18 years for murder. I don't think that that's unreasonable. It's not unreasonable, of course, if you're the parent, if you're family members, you will want to see perhaps the death sentence, or you're going to want to see that person spend a significant amount of time behind bars for the crime, and you may very well believe that 18 years is not enough. But when you look at the circumstances, he was 19, which means he was very young, and 19 in St. Lucia, I often say, translates into, say, maybe 14, 15 in the US, and that's a fact because kids do not grow up that quickly in St. Lucia. So he was 19, and he did a very, very made poor judgment, did something that was unthinkable, and he strangled a young lady and killed her. There really is no excuse for that. But I think he did 10 years without being proven guilty. After 10 years, you go in front of a court, you just want to see an end date. If it's 30 years, if it's 40 years, whatever it is, I'm going to be sentenced. Sentence me already so I can move on. So at that point, people will put in guilty pleas. People will do whatever they want to do. So I don't think you can really blame anyone really for the sentence. I think 18 years is adequate. He's already done 10. So you really ought to give him credit for that time that he has done. And then an additional 8 years. What I don't understand, and I perhaps the authorities could clear that in the media. What I don't understand is, in reading the story, it says he's going to have to serve 8 years, and it's going to run concurrently. And I don't understand why there is a concurrent running. Are we running night and day together as one? I mean, there are 24 hours in a day. 8 years is 8 years. So it ought really be the full 8 years and whatever time for good behavior that the system allows. So 18 years, family, it's tough, it's difficult, but it's adequate.
Yeah. Explain for our viewers who may not be aware, concurrently would mean the 8 years split into day and night, correct?
Well, apparently that's how it reads, and I don't know if the code addresses this. I've never heard of that before. When you hear of sentences running concurrently, it's generally because someone's convicted of more than one offense. For instance, if he was convicted of grievous harm and he was convicted of murder as well, although generally the lesser offense would be included in the greater one. But let's say he was convicted of burglary and murder, and he got a sentence of 4 years for burglary and 4 years for murder. You would say, well, that's a total of 8 years, but he's serving the sentences for the two crimes together. So it ends up being just a total of 4, as opposed to if you run it consecutively, one after the other, he would serve for burglary first, and then he would serve for murder next.
Excellent.
So to say concurrently, I have to believe that perhaps they're thinking night is 12 hours night is a day, and 12 hours during the day is a day. And so then you have night and day being considered two separate issues. It's really confusing. And if that's the law, I think that's doing an injustice to the victims.
To the victim, excellent. Need for some clarity there. But that's the sort of discussion that Ask the Advocate will bring to this platform come January 2023, hosted by former Magistrate T. Nigel Toussiant, who's my special guest here. Get familiar with the term and the name. Ask the Advocate on Hot 7 TV during Good Morning St. Lucia. This Crystal St. Omer case, and that's the last question for me on this one. It speaks to a deeper issue where you have an accused in prison for 10 years, a decade, with no semblance of justice. And you are familiar with the term, justice delayed is justice denied. It seems to be a big revolving problem for us here.
Yes, and again, justice delayed is justice denied. And generally, when we say that, we associate it with the defendant saying, well, he has a right to a speedy trial, and so he won't get the justice that he needs. But justice delayed and justice denied seem to apply to the victim as well, or to the family as well. For instance, in this Crystal case, the young man did 10 years and he hurriedly pled guilty and got another 8 years and he's out. Whereas if he had been brought to court and given a speedy trial, perhaps he would have gotten more than just the 18 years. But then when you have someone on remand for 10 years, emotions come to play in the court, and the judges may feel as if, an injustice has been done already. And so they're not sure, well, is he pleading guilty because he's just tired and wants an end to this? Or is he pleading guilty because he's actually guilty? Is he foregoing any self-defense that he may have because he doesn't want to be in the system any longer? So it really affects everybody all around. And if he had perhaps thought of it, he may not have even pled guilty. He may have gotten off scot-free because that constitutional requirement of a speedy trial was not met. So it affects the entire system. It affects us all. And that's one thing that we really, really need to work on. And DPP has to ensure that he gets cases before the court way faster than he is. I'm sure they didn't find additional evidence in the last 5 years that didn't have in the first 5 years. So what's the point of holding him for 10 years without a trial?
Well, that will stick with me, your guidance that perhaps had we have a proper justice system to ensure that that matter is tried in good time, perhaps the verdict would have been more than the 18 years. That sticks with
I believe so. I believe so, because when you wait that long, it presents additional issues. It allows the defense attorney to plead for his client and to say, well, we hadn't even found him guilty, and he doesn't even have a trial now because he's tired of being in the system without a verdict. So, and those are mitigating factors. Those are things that the court will likely take into consideration in deciding whether to, even if a heinous crime is committed, at the same time, you still have to ensure that justice is done, and you have to find that happy medium, which means neither side will ever be satisfied.
Yeah, we have a broken system from a magistrate, which if we don't fix, families like the St. Omers will continue to feel so disappointed. Are you confident that the system is sufficiently focused on rehabilitation, that when this young man has served his time, we do not have another individual just lurking within the communities, waiting on another victim?
See, that's the situation that is difficult to address unless you have some kind of research result, some kind of study to tell you what the recidivism rate is, how many of these people who offend are offending again and going back into the prison system. We have no testimonials, we have no stories from anyone really that says, well, hey, listen, I was a prisoner and I was able to get a degree while I was in prison. I was able to read and write because I came in not being able to read and write. There are programs that we can go to. And since I've been out, I've been able to find work. I'm a productive member of the society. We do not have these stories, and these are stories that we badly need, because that is what's going to tell you whether the young people are actually listening to us, whether they're not just being sent and held in captivity and coming back out lost and really in a position where they're going to offend again, whether they have support systems, because coming out, if you don't have a mother, many often mothers have died, fathers have died, brothers and sisters have moved, and a lot of these young people are all alone. And I know they're convicted criminals, but they're human nonetheless.
Yeah, some messages coming in, and there are numerous cases like this one. There's the Shaka Dan Daniel case. Somebody's saying that there is a case, somebody's on remand for 12 years now without a trial ever starting. With this,
What I think
go ahead.
what I think needs to be done at this point, especially since we're really out of space at Bordelais, and Bordelais was not designed to hold, large numbers of people. I think we should bring in a special, well, I'd say special in the terms of someone specific, a judge specifically for that kind of situation. Get somebody on the bench who can quickly, hurriedly go through those cases, put some pressure on the DPP, put some pressure on the police. If after 12 years you don't have any evidence, you're not going to get any evidence. It's not as if evidence is going to come up after 12 years. So if someone is on remand for 12 years, let's hear those cases. Let's move these people out of the system. If they're guilty, provide them with sentences, but put an end to the whole situation for them and for the victims as well. Now, Shannon, there's something else that I discovered happens in St. Lucia. I discovered that while I was on the bench. Often, there are some police officers, and I know they don't like when I refer to them, but sometimes you just have to if you're going to make changes. Some police officers who will arrest citizens, young men, for reasons that have nothing to do with the law. Put them behind bars and leave them there as their own personal punishment for these people. And that's wrong. And I'm sure if you go into the communities and you talk to the young men, they will tell you, and that we know that that's the reason they do it. Lock them up, throw away the key, punish them. In many instances, they haven't done anything wrong or haven't done anything sufficient to get the sentences that they're getting without trials. And we need to look at that and to correct that situation in the police force. Absolutely. If you have no reason to arrest, you don't arrest. You don't detain unnecessarily. And these are all human rights violations as well.
All human rights violations. These are sort of discussion and issues we'll have on Ask the Advocate with Nigel Toussiant coming to this platform next season. Finally, because former magistrate, we've run out of time. Our broken legal system, years after independence, we're still talking, we know the issues, no semblance of real action. Do we have the political will here to do something, or are we just comfortable with things as it is?
We have to think about who's running things. And we have to be honest with ourselves. The upper echelon of societies basically run the society. In St. Lucia, lawyers and judges basically run things. That's the way I've seen it. That's the way it happens. And I do not believe the justice system run things for the benefit of the people who come to the justice system. From what I've seen often, people are working for themselves. They're not working for you. The end game is for them to get. And so I do not see that changing because no one wants to make the change. And then you have politics. Politicians often go in thinking or saying they want to do what's right for the people. But the minute they get in, it's either they find out that it's a lot more difficult to make the change that maybe perhaps they truly want to make, and so they abandon that aspect of it. Often people do not want to be victimized because you will be victimized. You absolutely will be victimized when you step up to try to really make changes in St. Lucia. Ask Mary Frances. I'm sure she has stories. The people do not understand that when you speak about what government does, you're really speaking for the people. When you say that justice system needs to be fixed, you're speaking for the people. When you put pressure on judges, on lawyers, on magistrates, on the police, you do it for the people. And the people are the ones who need that, but they're the ones who will push back more than anything. And then we're politically divided. So anytime you speak and you're asking government to do a function that government ought to do, the people who support government will push back. But then when their side is not in office, they're faced with the exact same issue, but then the supporters of that side will push back. So how do you get to the point where everybody's satisfied? Because if it doesn't affect you today, it may very well affect you or someone close to you tomorrow. So I do believe that there may be one or two of us with that political will. I can guarantee you that I do have that political will. I do want to see changes because I've seen where it can be done better. Nothing is perfect, but this system is far, far, far from what it ought to be. I don't think a lot of our leaders even really understand what needs to be done, what they should do. With the young people today, we have the whole gang subculture, and we want to just form another ORC, kill these young men, put them away. But you know what? What we're reaping today in the communities with the guns and the violence, that's a legacy of ORC. Because when we had ORC and we killed all of whom we determined to be the bad boys, you know what we did? We killed the men who today would have been what you call the OGs in the yard. Subcultures need leaders. So now we have a lot of young men who grew up hearing about how their father was killed or their friend's father was killed. And so they have absolutely no respect for the society because they do not see the society as one that protects them. So they've revolted. And the way they've done that is to form their own gangs. But they don't understand because they had no guidance. And gangs, even gangs, need guidance. They need leaders. They need norms. They need values among themselves. So do we truly have gangs, or we do just have a group of young men lost, don't see their way, do not trust the system, do not trust lawyers, do not trust the education system, which to a large extent has them in the position that they are, because many of them do not know how to read and write. But how many of us know that? So now they're revolted, but with no leadership, because the leaders that would have been there for them were killed during ORC.
Casualty
You
of
have no
ORC.
OGs on, you have no OGs in the yard. You have nobody to say, yo, man, I've been through this. You can't do that. No, we're not doing that. That's not how we roll. No one to say that to them. So we have to start from the very bottom. We have to start right now to ensure we do not lose another set of young people, because it's going to get younger and younger. And the way we do that, everybody says it starts in the family. It's the schools. It's the education system. Trust me. Because when these kids go to school, they spend more time there than they do at home. And the school's in a better position to see and recognize when somebody's going wrong. But you know what they do? They quickly send the child home. The simple little things that kids do, they send them home. And the parents are at work, they can't do anything. So what's going to happen? The gang steps in and looks after them. So our situation with the justice system is as much our social problems as anything else.
Yep.
And unless we correct the education problem, the social problem, the lack of equity in our society, it is not going to change. And we have to start going into these neighborhoods, community by community, reaching these young people, finding out why they went wrong. Well, I was in school and, my teacher was never paying any attention to me and I didn't learn how to read and write and the kids were laughing at me. So I stopped going to school. Back in the day, it used to be, well, I go to school and, redhead was just tearing my behind up with licks and I didn't want to get licked. So I went to school. So now you had a lot of juvenile delinquents by the basin diving for coins. This is just a progression. And those of us that have lived long enough understand what's happening. We know what's happening. And it can be fixed. But we have to find those among us who have the will, the intention, the good heart, the empathy, who understands what's happening to step in and to do what needs to be done. And yes, there are a few that are going to be angry about it, but you have a country to run and it has to be run. Otherwise, we will all lose.
As the advocate, T. Nigel Toussiant, I want to thank you for coming on this morning. We'll be in close contact with you. Thanks for coming on. Some evidence somebody just sent me on how broken the justice system is. Could you believe that since September of this year, because of a broken air condition, a magistrate, a sitting judge, has not been able to have a trial since September this year because of a broken AC. See how broken it is?
Broken AC, and that makes no sense.
I tell you.
People waiting for that courtroom, excuse me, the people waiting for that courtroom, what's happening with them? They're getting angrier and angrier and angrier.
Yep.
And then what's going to happen?
Yep. Nigel, we're out of time this morning. We'll talk again. My producers here, we have to go this morning. My apologies, but we'll talk again. Always valuable having you on.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Good morning.
She will be the guest on a new feature which comes your way in the new year, next season. The feature is called Ask the Advocate, right here on Good Morning St. Lucia, Fridays, with former Magistrate T. Nigel Toussiant. I dare them to say that that's not the case. A sitting judge has not been able to have a trial since September 2022 because of a broken AC. Shameful.